there was kind of this way of presenting the participative, the perspectival, the procedural, and the propositional as four distinct categories. But there, to me, there wasn't exactly a clear explanation of how those categories related to each other. But I wanted them to relate to each other, and I wanted a process through them. And so I spent weeks thinking about that as I was getting to the end of the Meaning Crisis series. And yeah, there was a little bit that was fitting together, like the perspectival going into the procedural made sense to me, and where the propositional went, and how I think the hardest thing for me was the participative. But I ended up laying in bed thinking one night, and then I had this kind of, I had the idea that the participative flows into the perspectival, and that becomes embodied in the participatory and then shared through the propositional.
Hi there. Today I'm very happy to have with me Andrew Algra
Yeah, Algra.
from Canada, close to Edmonton. What town exactly?
Yeah, just an hour north of Calgary, about on a small acreage where the moose like to walk through.
Very Canadian.
Yeah.
Yes, that's wonderful. So you're a member of our little corner, and I've seen you. We've had some exchanges on Twitter, and
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to join our little corner of the internet.
Yeah. So I think my journey into the corner started just after I moved out to Alberta. So I grew up in British Columbia in the Fraser Valley, so near Vancouver, and all the rain and the plants and people. And then when I was 29, I decided to move out here to the prairie, so over the mountains. And then I
What
had
made
the good
you?
fortune.
I'm sorry. What made you decide to move out into the prairie?
Well, I do have a brother here, so most
Mhm.
of my family's out there in the valley. But I have a brother here, and he invited me to come and help him with a building project because
Mm.
I spent a bunch of time doing construction work, and
Mhm.
so I helped him with this building project, and then met some people out here. And I was here for about 3 months, and I met my now wife, so I got stuck here. But yeah, we dated and were married quickly, and when I was 30. And around that time I was praying a lot because we
Mhm.
were attending church here, and I felt like I didn't have a very grounded sense of my faith, and I was okay kind of
Yeah.
drifting, and
May I ask
coping.
you what church you were attending?
Just an evangelical
Okay.
kind of
Mhm.
Protestant typical
Mhm.
church. Yeah. Kind of a pseudo denomination.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be responsible for my family and my home with our faith. And so I was praying a lot for wisdom,
Mhm. Oh,
actually.
nice.
Well, yeah, while we were engaged. And after we were married. And then yeah, I feel like my prayers have been somewhat answered. Maybe others can say better than me, but I had, yeah, some intense experiences and some just different things that led me to a more phenomenological perspective,
Mhm.
right? And taking the Bible more seriously.
Mhm.
And so yeah, during the first 2 years of marriage, I spent a lot of time reading and listening to
Mhm.
different teachers and pastors and rabbis and whoever commenting on the Bible. And that inevitably led me to the biblical series, the Genesis series with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I went down the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole and that led me to Peugeot and
Yes.
Vervaeke. Yeah, and then
Makes
that,
sense.
yeah, yeah, and then
Yeah, you-
seeing Mr. Vanderclay, and I remember hunting for the link for that Discord.
Uh-huh.
I was trying to find that server, so
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I managed to find my way on around 2 years ago, maybe.
Mhm.
So yeah, I had really good conversations on there, and yeah, then found my way to the conference in September, and that was amazing.
Oh, so I was there too.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
guess we didn't actually meet, per se, but I'm pleased to know you were there. What did you think?
yeah, yeah. So I know you were there because you were mentioned, but I
Oh
hadn't
yeah, at the end, yeah.
yeah, I hadn't spent a lot of time on your channel, so I
Uh,
wasn't very familiar.
yeah.
And it it's such a full moment, right? There's so many people and there's so
Hmm.
much expression happening there. It's so rich. So
Hmm.
I think it would have been fun to meet there, but maybe this is the way we should meet. So yeah, happy for that. It was really cool to um, meet the speakers and all
Yeah,
the other attendees and to
yeah,
be able to share ideas and be in person with the shared vocabulary, I think.
absolutely.
Yeah, it was really fulfilling.
Mhm.
So it's very cool.
What did you like best about what are some things that really stood out for you from Thunder Bay?
So as far as the talks, the the thing that stood out to me most was when Peugeot spoke and Vervaeke spoke on the left and right symbolism, and then on the opponent processing.
Mhm.
And that was so valid, like, I want to say validating, but like to me, those they said the same thing in their talks.
Yeah.
Like the way that I'm hearing it, it's the same. They're saying the same thing. And so that's kind of one of the reasons I went, is because I have this idea that their work is very um, coherent with one another, and that's part of why their dialogues are so good, that they're exploring compatible ideas with these very different points of origin in these different vocabularies. And that resolving that tension between their work is kind of the inspiration for me and what I'm trying to do with creating content as well.
Mhm.
So
Well, you've got some ideas and you've got some visuals.
yeah.
Before we get to that, I want to backtrack a little and ask you that you said you started having more phenomenological sensibility of your faith.
Mm.
Can you talk a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
more about that?
Well, it has, like, Matthew talks about it. Matthew Peugeot talks about it in the beginning of his book, The Language of Creation. Right. So going from a worldview of a model towards a worldview of experience. Right. And I think that for me, asking for wisdom had to do with this need for embodiment, maybe,
Hmm.
or for a need from an original perspective, an unfiltered perspective. And so just looking at the world in a more direct way and
Hmm.
experiencing it in a more direct way, and kind of having the sensation of bypassing the structures that had been built up for me to see the world through. I
Hmm.
think there's something like that that happened with me. And so going through that and reading the Bible in that kind of a state, the book was completely different.
Mm.
And the thing just made more sense to me, and it seemed more immediate, and it seemed more relatable to my own experience. And I was seeing myself in the narratives more so. And so I ripped through the Bible like really quickly.
Amazing.
And yeah, I was at the time I was actually roof contracting. So I
Mhm.
was laboring, doing roofs for people. I was gone from home for like 15 hours a day, and just listening to like all everything I can get my hands on. So thousands of hours of teaching over those 2 years.
A
This
lot of Peugeot, but probably if there were so many hours, there was probably other stuff too. So what was some of the other things you were listening to?
Yeah, well, I was listening to rabbis, um, and messianic teachers and some Christian teachers. And this is 6, 7 years ago.
Mhm.
So I've, yeah, I haven't kept up with where those people are
Uh-huh.
at or what's going on with them. But after that, that's that 2 year period. That's when I got into Peterson.
Yeah.
And then I was in Peterson, and then I was looking at more psychology and counseling
So you
and
were
things of
looking
that
at
nature.
Peterson through, I mean, you're like the algorithm took you to Peterson's Bible lectures specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I went through a lot of his
Yeah.
classroom content
Oh,
and
good.
that sort of
Yeah.
stuff as well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I'm interested in that sort of thing.
So
So
so you started, did Peterson pique your interest in psychology and counseling, or were you already kind of thinking about it to begin with?
yeah, I think more so. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So that there was yeah, because I kind of spent my interest in the area that I was, and I needed something fresh, and Peterson kind of
Mhm.
provided that, and then Peugeot and Vervaeke subsequent to him
Mhm.
provided that as well for me. So, and yeah, each of those periods was around 2 years, I suppose.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was listening to Peugeot's ideas and Matthew's book, and then listening to Vervaeke's ideas, and I was having trouble with the 4 P's of knowing. And this is over a year ago now. So I think he was less definite about his categorization than he is now. But I was looking for how they fit together, because there was kind of this way of presenting the participative, the perspectival, the procedural, and the propositional as 4 distinct categories. But there, to me, there wasn't exactly a clear explanation of how those categories related to each other. But I wanted them to relate to each other, and I wanted a process through them. And so I spent weeks thinking about that as I was getting to the end of the Meaning Crisis series. And yeah, there was a little bit that was fitting together, like the perspectival going into the procedural made sense to me, and where the propositional went, and how I think the hardest thing for me was the
Mhm.
participative. But I ended up laying in bed thinking one night, and then I had this kind of I had the idea that the participative flows into the perspectival, and that becomes embodied then in the participatory, and then shared through the propositional. And then there was this
Mhm.
stack. And so I had these 4 layers in my mind, and then they were coming up into a single unity of a thing then. Because when they're connected together, when you have categories and then you properly arrange them together, then that's a way of unifying them, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this super category of the ways of knowing, which is,
Mhm.
I think, wisdom.
Yeah.
So it
Are
comes up
you, oh, I'm sorry, just real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you sort of looking at that through the Pageauian hierarchy?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
visual
Yeah.
representation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the higher it goes, then the more heavenly or the more
Mhm.
conceptual it is. And the lower it is, then the more grounded and the less
Mhm.
conscious it is. So um then I had the idea that, well, if it comes up into unity, that should be balanced, and it should go down into multiplicity.
Mhm.
And then so I took so I'm just laying in my bed
Mhm.
picturing this, and then each of the 4 levels splits into 2 modes. So then you have each level, and you have a active and a passive kind of mode
Oh.
for each of the levels. And I was thinking, well, how would I represent that? And so I had the colors and the
Uh-huh.
shapes all in my head, and then the layers. And then the last thing that came is, oh, and then the whole thing breaks through back into itself and repeats. And then I was kind of overwhelmed. I couldn't hold it all in my head anymore.
Oh.
So I ran to my computer, and I sketched it, and then
Mhm.
I drew it in my app, and then that took about an hour and a half, and I made the picture. So
Okay, well, that's
yeah.
fascinating. So why don't we take a look at what you created in that hour and a half?
Yeah, well, this is the second version.
Uh-huh.
So I took that to Thunder Bay. I took
Mhm.
prints
Yeah.
with this structure on it, and I got
Uh-huh.
to share it with the speakers. And yeah, it was really cool, and with other attendees, and talk about it, because I wanted to know if
Good.
I didn't want to go online and talk about it like I knew what I was saying
Mhm.
if I didn't know what I was saying, right?
Right.
So I got to share with Jonathan, and he wasn't sure exactly about what I was up to, but that's okay. And then I got to share it with Paul, and then he was quite interested in it and
Mhm.
encouraging, and he thought I should talk about it. And then I got to share it with Mr. Vervaeke, and
Mhm.
then that was really cool, because I had actually labels for everything. There's maybe 23 different elements in there.
Mhm.
And I asked him about the ones I wasn't sure of, and he basically okayed the whole thing.
Good.
And he encouraged me to write about it.
Mhm.
So I thought, okay, well, I've done my thesis defense now. It's time to go and write something. So yeah, it was very, very cool to
Mhm.
go, and then and to also to be able to share some of my thoughts with other attendees, and
Mhm.
get some feedback, and to see that people thought that this might be valuable. So, and
Well,
then now
why don't you tell me what
sorry,
we're
go ahead.
looking at? Why don't you, tell us what we're looking at and explain this? I mean, it's
Okay.
intriguing and fascinating.
Yeah. So the four pictures in the center
Mhm.
relate to each of those pictures is a way of knowing,
Mhm.
right? But it's not exactly, because the way of knowing I see as a function, right? So there's this way that we know things. Um, and that describes a function, but like John said in one of his talks at the conference, where consciousness has a function, it also has a nature,
Mhm.
right? And
Consciousness has
so
a function and also has a nature.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because he was describing that there's functional definitions of
Mhm.
consciousness, and then being definitions of
Mhm.
consciousness, but you need to approach both to have a comprehensive definition. So to me, these four layers actually correspond with the biblical layers of being.
And
So it's
again, you're going to, I don't know, you know the Bible well, way better than I do. So can you explain it to me in a sort of simple, like as if I don't know anything at all?
yeah, well, you probably know this. Um, so in the Gospels, Jesus says, when he quotes the greatest commandment, he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with
Mhm.
all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and with all your mind." Right. So
Mhm.
there's four
Heart.
categories of
Yeah.
being there.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah. Mhm.
in the picture, I have a picture of an anatomical heart,
Mhm.
and then breath, which is
Mhm.
inspiration, that's the
Yes.
spirit, your soul. And then the next layer is bones and muscle,
Mhm.
that's your strength. And then the next layer is your brain, which is your mind.
Wonderful.
So my argument is that the heart corresponds to the participatory, the breath or the spirit corresponds to the perspectival, the strength in the body corresponds to procedural,
Mhm.
and then the mind corresponds to the propositional. Right. And it's in the same order. So what was very affirming for me is that when I had intuited this order, or I don't
Mhm.
know how it came to me, um, this is the same order that it's presented in the Bible.
Mhm.
And it's also the same order that John settled on describing this process in his talks later on. Right. So that this is the order of the flow of the ways of knowing. It's also the stack of
Yes.
the layers of being. And so each layer of being has a nature, and
Mhm.
it expresses its function through that way of knowing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On either side, like you've got the two aspects of it, I imagine,
Yeah.
male and female. Can you explain the aspects?
Yeah. So the participatory has um I see it as a masculine and a feminine aspect. Aspect is a good word. I've been
Mhm.
thinking the word modes, but modes would relate to the function, and aspect, I guess, relate to the being. So there's a masculine and a feminine, right? And then the eyes, the open eye is actually focused and directed. And then the half-lidded eye is unfocused or peripheral. So you have a focal perspective and a peripheral perspective. And then the hands, the active side is grasping, and the passive side is receiving. Right. And then for the propositional, and this is really important because I think there's several major challenges with understanding the 4 Ps that I think this helps with. And this is one of them, that the propositional, the active side, which is a quill, right? That is definition, right? And then the passive side, which is a brush, is expression.
Oh, yes.
Right. So there was a conversation that was popular on YouTube right before the conference, which is Pajot, Vervaeke, and Peterson all at Peterson's place, discussing the tension between the nomological and the narrative. Right. And to me, the nomological is the definitive, and the narrative is the expressive.
Can you remind me, can you define nomological for me again? I forgot what
nomos pertaining to the law. So the nomological being rules or natural laws that bind expression. And then there was this question of which is superior, right? But kind of the purpose of me displaying these 2 modes is that the modes are co-conforming. And they exchange priority naturally in relationship. And so there's this back and forth between masculine and feminine, between focal and peripheral, between grasping and receiving, and then between defining and expressing. Right. So we need to be balanced in those different expressions at every layer. And if you're balanced in each of those modes through each of those layers, then you're a balanced person, is the idea. And so this is the structure of a person, is what's being described here, is my argument, I guess.
Well, that really makes a lot of sense. That brings a lot of things together for me, you know, in the same kind of way that I keep seeing repeated. You know, the more we kind of talk about these things in this little corner, you've got these 2 aspects that you know, like I was talking to Karen Wong. I had seen a video previously by something totally unrelated to this, but the fellow in the video called it a conjugate pair, meaning that they're indelibly linked, that there's no way you can separate them, that the unity itself is in the multiplicity, is in the duality, let's just say. And so again, with this, which is so fascinating, is you know, in a totally different way, in a unique and wonderful way that you've derived, it's again that concept coming up.
And part of this is that the modes are outside the structure of being. So the structure of being is the central pillar, right? And then the modes are outside of it. And so every mode that is described in the image is a totality. But there's no totality in a manifestation, because it only finds its manifestation by meeting its opposite, and it's by way of the opposite that it finds its real expression. So
that makes sense to me intuitively, but can you sort of elaborate on that? I know this is tough stuff.
It's like, well, that has to do, I think, with Pajot's how Pajot describes things. In the first verse of the Bible, you have God creating heaven and earth. Right. And it is in the relationship between heaven and earth that we have meaning. Right. So if the earth is the material and the heavenly is the pattern, if you have material with no pattern, you can't see it. And if you have pattern with no material, you cannot be it. Like there's no real presence, right?
It can't manifest.
Right. There's no
Yeah, yeah,
manifestation. And
yeah.
so you need an element of
Mhm,
both before you have something. And so the way that that dynamic works vertically,
mhm.
I think, is the same way that dynamic works horizontally. Right. And
Yeah,
so it's the orientation between the horizontal aspects and then the vertical relationship, that is the actual manifestation. That's where something is.
is in the is in the horizontal.
Well, it's in the meeting. It's in the meeting between the pattern and the material,
Yeah.
right? And that's the vertical positioning. And then there's between the modal expressions of active and passive. At the conference, they use the words eccentric and concentric,
Oh, yeah.
which I really like, because
Mhm.
this is also the left and right handed, right? Or the
Yes,
left and right
exactly.
brain.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and, like the McGilchrist stuff, I'm sure you've listened
Yeah.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same idea, right? Yeah. But it's in the relationship between the
Mhm.
hemispheres that the functional thought is produced. So
So it's got to be, so the meaning and everything that really counts is in the meeting of the of it.
yeah, it's in the
Like,
meeting, right? And that's
in yeah, the
Perseg's
quality
argument,
event.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I had a
Yeah.
question for you.
Yes.
um I when I was listening to your series on ZAM,
Uh-huh.
I got more and more, the way that I think of the Father, Spirit, and Son is a little
Mhm.
bit different, but from the usual. Um, but I was building the impression that when Persig is talking about quality, to me, he's talking somehow about the Spirit becoming the Son. And so I think a good metaphor for quality in the Bible would be the Immaculate Conception.
Oh, okay. The spirit
So,
becoming the sun. Maybe we want to increase our window size again. Like,
oh, sure, yeah,
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 yeah, there we go. I want to see you.
okay, yeah, yeah.
Okay, tell me more about how, again, because because my biblical knowledge is
Right.
very very rudimentary.
Yeah.
So the Immaculate Conception, what is that? What does that represent in the way that you're seeing it?
So it says that the Spirit comes on Mary,
Uh-huh.
right? Or
Yeah.
and then Mary's with child,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
right? And so the Spirit causes within Mary the Son to appear.
Yes.
And it's that moment of causation
Yes.
that I think corresponds to kind of what Persig is trying to describe
Mhm.
as the quality event.
Yes. I think that makes absolute sense.
Cool. I just
Yeah.
wanted to add that.
Well, in your, because my argument is, and again, there's a whole lot of things I still need to learn, and I need to learn much more about, understanding the Bible for sure. I'm working on understanding a little bit more philosophy. I'm in a book club. We're reading Plato. I'm
Okay.
trying to, I'm trying to
Yeah.
step up to the plate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because I really did come into this just with one book and one book only, and stabbing around in the dark trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So this corner has been really useful, but I argue that Persig is useful for understanding these things as well, and I think that, you're kind of, backing me up on that.
Yeah.
Um,
I loved it. Like,
yeah.
your series, like, there was so much that just overlaid with my thought. Like, it
Mhm.
just made total sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it like once you're out of the material, like what, I mean, Pajot even calls it the materialist way of understanding,
Yeah.
the total propositional way of understanding. Then
Mhm.
then then anyone who has seen through that and seen, like, the structure of the process of reality versus the outcome,
Yeah.
like the static dynamic process versus just the static patterns, let's say,
Yeah.
which is all the way we've seen up to now. Once it's revealed that this is really the nature of reality, then you just see it with a lot of important stuff. You see it with biblical, you see it with neuroscience, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, it changes the manifestation of
Yeah,
reality in your perspective. Like that,
yeah.
there's so much that was waiting to be noticed that
Hmm.
the new
Yes, that's
perspectival
a beautiful
frame,
way to put it. Yes,
yeah,
waiting to be noticed.
allows it to allows you to have the relationship it's been craving. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love the way you put that.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to show one more thing in my
Oh,
picture.
absolutely. Yes.
Um, because that's in there as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
So this, so that's in these golden circles.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So there's one
Yeah.
here, and then there's one here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that to me is something like the logos. And so there's the what's above us, right? The upper limit or
Mm-hmm.
the upper threshold of conception. And then there's the lower threshold of emergence,
Mm-hmm.
like the source of emanation and
Mm-hmm.
emergence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we look upward, we see it from below. And so the circle's half gold on the
Mm-hmm.
bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look down, we see it as from
Mm-hmm.
above. And so the circle's half gold on top, but it's really the same circle.
Yes.
And that is the essential intelligibility of nature, which is something that I've been hearing in more conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the lower, right? And then the upper is the transcendent relevance of pattern.
Okay. Can you repeat that again?
So the lower threshold of perception, as far down as we can see,
Yeah. The threshold of perception.
there always will be something sensible about it
Mm-hmm.
to us, right? So we can't look at anything and not have it fit, because then we wouldn't be able to look at it,
That's
right? So
right. It wouldn't, it would, as Persic said, it doesn't have a, if it doesn't have a value, it won't present itself to us.
yeah,
It would
and Vervaeke talks about it too, like that
yeah.
nature is trustworthy. Like we need to act as if reality will continue to be reality, and every
Mm-hmm.
time we act that way, we're affirmed in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's something essentially true about the material world,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I call that kind of the essential intelligibility of material or matter. And then there's a
Yeah.
corresponding function at the top, right? Which is that if you have a if you can draw a concept out of an experience, or out of if you can intuit a pattern
Mm-hmm.
from something in the environment, that pattern then will allow you to find some kind of corresponding relevance to something else, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a true pattern, and
Yes.
so that allows us to transpose meaning between things through the
Mm-hmm.
upper pattern, right? And we go up and up and up and up until we find the meta pattern that contains all
Mm-hmm.
patterns, right? And that is relevant to everything, right? And so the going up is the steps of transcendence, right? And every step of transcendence brings more relevance to everything else,
Mm-hmm.
brings more of a broad sense of relevance. And so that's the transcendent relevance of meaning. And so the transcendent relevance at the top and the essential intelligibility at the bottom come from the same thing, which Persig would call quality,
Mm-hmm.
which I would call the logos.
Yes.
And it's actually the logos that's one, it's our perception that's divided.
Well, there's one, I mean, I'm just, this is one thing I'm wondering about. Would you call the logos, because quality is sort of, um,
Right.
in person, quality is sort of pre-logos in a way. It's
Yeah,
like,
in a way. Yeah, I would say that it's not, I don't think quality and logos are the same. That's why I said I think quality is more like the event
mhm,
of the Immaculate Conception.
yeah,
Like where it's where it's like the golden half of the circle or something like
yeah,
that in the picture. It's
mhm,
where reality is becoming, yeah, the whole train metaphor is better than what I could say.
No, but we need to, I mean, this is what's so fun about this corner, is working on this stuff and seeing how,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
figuring it out. Like maybe would you say the Immaculate Conception, like what I would say, and maybe I'm wrong, is that the moment of conception itself is the quality event.
yeah,
And the fertilize, the now you're going to become a baby, right?
right.
That's it's fertilized, it's going to become a baby. That's
Hmm.
the logos, is that expression of the quality in the material world. If that makes any sense. Now, I don't, this is where it's going to get difficult. Is the quality
Yeah,
of logos? Because I don't think so exactly, because in Persig, the
yeah, I
quality
don't
of
think so either.
is pre-intellectual. It is before logos. Logos is the moment where you understand that something has happened.
Okay,
Like in Persig, like when he says, um, when he says the analog, it's like it's pre-analog, it's post it's post quality event and pre-analog. if
logos.
if that
Okay,
makes if that makes any sense, and I may be, again, stabbing in the dark, but
yeah,
it seems to me that it's pre-intellectual, then it's that aha moment that it becomes manifest in the world to you, and then you relate it to something else. Like you said, the pattern has to have another pattern in order for it to meet.
right.
It
Has to
has
be
to be
seen.
expressed in the world with something, and it has to be an analog with
Right.
something that is already known in order to be manifest.
Yeah, I think it's fine to think of it like that. I mean, it's using the word differently
Yeah.
than I'm using it, but that's,
Yeah, and
I
that's
mean,
why logos is such a, I mean, I think logos is one of those words that we're constantly trying to figure out how to use, what it really means, if at least
yeah,
for me. And then I hear it being used differently in different ways,
yeah, yeah, I think so. It's,
so
and that's, it's hard because
mhm,
that's part of the relevance, right? Because it's
yeah,
such a high concept. It's like, oh, look, it's relevant to
yeah,
this. And then you have this whole section of thought that kind of connects back to that
yeah,
idea. But that when you're describing or using a definition within
mhm,
that scope, then you're excluding a whole bunch of other things that
mhm,
it also pertains to.
yeah, sure,
So
yeah,
it's, yeah, it's a really,
yeah,
and then talking about what actually exists and before our experience or before our being. I mean, it's, you can't, it's ineffable.
exactly,
So
exactly.
so
Which is,
that's the white part of
yeah,
the circle. That's the half
that
of the
makes
circle,
sense. That
because
makes
we
sense.
can't see that. We
Yeah.
can't see it, but it's
I,
there. But
I tend to think quality is more in that realm. I think
yeah,
quality is sort of like um it's sort of like the potential of all reality at all times. And it's the stuff that isn't manifest. It's like when this when heaven and earth separate. Now I'm gonna get myself into a pickle.
oh no.
It's kind of like when have like heaven and earth need to separate, because that's what God wants. He wants that to happen. He
Yeah,
wants light to come out, or let's just say, let there be light, and it is
yeah,
good, right?
yeah, yeah,
So nothing, light, that's the logos, and good is the understanding.
yeah. Okay, so the, before he says let there be light, the verse before that says the spirit is hovering over the water.
Uh-huh.
So the spirit, you could see it, like I see it, as the breath
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah.
And so the breath is what is moving
Yeah.
in and out of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? Above the waters. And then when that breath has a form,
Mm-hmm.
that's what words are.
Yes.
Words are the form of your breath. And so the
Yes.
word is let there be light. That's logos. And so the quality is more analogous to the spirit there.
Mm-hmm.
It is what the word, it is what is driving and filling the words. And
Yes.
then
Yes.
the speech, the
Yes.
act of speech, there's the, that's immaculate conception, that's the quality
Uh-huh.
event,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Yeah, so I think there, maybe there's correspondence there, not with the logos but with the spirit, in the way
Mm-hmm.
that I see it. Yeah.
Did you end up diving into the Persig books, or 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 listen to my commentary?
I just rather listen because I read because I remember reading Zam. So I'm the
Okay, so
youngest
you
of
did read it. Yeah, you did read it.
well, I read part of it.
Uh-huh.
So I'm the youngest of six, right?
Uh-huh.
And my oldest brother is 13 years older than me,
Yeah.
and my sister's 11 years older than me. And when I was 12, she's 23, I
Mm-hmm.
think, even 11. But she was engaged, and her I found this out from my brother because I was
Mm-hmm.
asking him about this book, and her fiance had come to our house and he had left this book at our house. He's a motorcycle guy
Mm-hmm.
and he was in
Right.
university. And so he had Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. And I was a kid. And I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
motorcycles, that's cool. And I don't know how many times I picked this book up and I read the cover and the jacket. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, it doesn't really seem like a book for me, 11 years old. And then when I was 12, I read this other book about a motorcycle trip. And it was like a novel.
Uh-huh.
So that was fine. I thought, oh, I'll try the other motorcycle book. And so I started reading Zam, and oh man, the ghost of Phaedrus was pretty
Yeah.
scary, I gotta say.
Uh-huh.
And Chris's experience, because which character am I going to identify with? It's Chris, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so Chris is having all these issues and whatever. And I happened to read it right after my dad had been in a terrible accident, like
Mm.
a career-ending
Mm.
accident. He almost died, and so he's
Mm.
in recovering in the hospital bed for months. And then my parents ended up getting divorced,
Wow.
and then so I'm starting to deconstruct at that age. And then I read this book, and then it gets to the part where Chris tells his dad about the conversation they had, and then the narrator says, oh no, we never talked. And then the dissonance there was
Mhm.
too uncomfortable
Yeah.
for me with the state of my father and
100%.
my
Yeah.
and so I dropped the book. But when I read your first or read when I listened to your first video, and you read the section of the birds coming flying, and I remember seeing that in my mind as I read it, and I thought, oh boy, I'm in for it. So it was really good for me to listen to your series because it resolved a lot of that tension.
Oh, well, so it had a slightly therapeutic effect.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. And then to get through to the end and see
Mhm.
the resolution, and it's a very hopeful
I think
conclusion.
so. I think it is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is saying, and in a lot of ways it's hopeful. A lot of the ways we're talking about, you can't just be Robert running around, like being a conform, just keeping his nose clean in the propositional world. You have to,
Yeah.
you have to be your full self.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to integrate everything that, and if you push it down, it's going to come haunt you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary, but that's the adventure of life, right? So
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what I guess you'd call, I guess you'd call shadow work. If you don't fully understand yourself, then you're kind of split.
yeah.
You're not integrated.
Yeah. And that's really
Mhm.
the goal, right? Is to become
Yeah.
integrated, I think.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what John's project is,
Mhm.
and Jonathan,
Mhm.
and like the whole this little corner is this whole search for a functional integration in a way,
Yeah,
because
I think
people,
that's right.
yeah, and people are looking for their for not a kind of total fixed state resolution, but a procedural resolution, a kind of process that they can comfortably and confidently engage in to be
Yeah.
able to facilitate their own reintegration.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the health of the community and the health of the
Mhm.
individuals kind of reflect one another in that way. It's interesting the stage that the community is in right now, and with people like me. And I know there's other people, it's not me, but there's other people that also were inspired by this
Mhm.
conference event, and there's a scattering and a multiplying that's happening now. So
Yeah, I think that's
interesting to
very
see
true. It is interesting to see, isn't it?
where it will go. Yeah.
So there's another one happening in May. Just
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't
just
think I'll be
putting it
able to
out there.
go. Yeah, I
That's
was
that might
thinking
be more
about.
difficult because it's in California, not Canada.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking of going and talking to my wife, and oh, I don't know, it's expensive.
Yeah, it is.
And she basically forced me to go to the first one.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was amazing. But
Good.
then a friend texted me and he said, "Oh, I bought tickets for Peterson and you should come with me. It's the same
Mhm.
weekend." So I thought, oh well, I guess that's what I'll do. Hopefully there's more events and
I'm sure there will be. So you're going to see Peterson the same weekend that the event is
yeah,
in California. Is that the first time you're going to see him?
second.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, because I brought this friend with me a couple years ago,
mhm.
and then he wanted to return the favor. So
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the first time I saw him was in Canada. I saw him in Toronto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's not too far away for you, is it? To get
No,
up to
no,
Toronto?
not at all.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's far for me.
yeah. You really, I mean,
Everything,
Thunder
everything's
Bay,
far.
Thunder Bay was really far from most people,
Yeah,
no matter where they were.
yeah.
So I'm curious, so are you remaining, I don't want to ask too many personal questions about your practice, but
Mm.
are you staying in the same, I'm just curious, are you staying in the same church? Are you thinking of doing something more formal? Does the Orthodox
Oh,
aspect
that
appeal to you?
that church, um, that that relationship lasted about, I don't know, about 6 months after I got married.
Mhm,
And then things ended with the church.
mhm,
And so I became messianic,
mm,
so Old and New Testament. It's
mhm,
kind of another instance of bringing the two together. But I have a private group that I meet with, a Bible study group. So I meet with anywhere from 30 to 60 people,
mhm.
usually most weekends. And then we do Bible readings, singing, and then we have an open conversation for usually a couple hours. And so that's my community now.
Yeah, and you all ways of knowing in that from what you're describing.
I think so. We
Yeah.
lean, and in the past, we have leaned more towards the propositional, like a
Mhm.
good Protestant of Protestants. But yeah, well, when I started with this group, we would go from 10 in the morning to 10 at
Mhm.
night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty
That's
intense. And then
very
now
intense.
yeah, it's heavy, like tiresome. But so many people were so excited about the
Mhm.
Bible and about our conversations that we got to have, and everyone was learning so much. So now we go from 11 till 4, 11 till
Mhm.
5 or so, and that's a little bit more manageable. So yeah, it's really good, really
Mhm.
close, really grounded, down to earth group of folks. And yeah.
And it seems to be filling, both your need for practice and community and study.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very motivating.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and very practical, like farmers and engineers, and
Oh,
very
nice.
practical people. So good for me, because I get a little lost in the clouds from time to time.
Yeah, and you like to go back to, well, you're one of these people I so admire who can work with their hands and their mind as well, both, very, very adeptly.
Yeah, maybe not by choice, but I couldn't hack it in university, so I had to get a job.
Uh,
So
well, it's not for
yeah,
everyone, sometimes
yeah.
the smartest, it's sometimes the more most insightful people make that decision.
Yeah, I think it's like an element of that, and then my own dysfunction and lack of discipline. So, but being married has helped a lot with that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I think maybe if you'd be interested, and again, I don't want to pry, but I don't know anything about the Messianic faith. And it'd be really
Okay.
interesting if if you'd like to talk about that in a upcoming, if you'd like to come on again and talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, we could.
And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's something another way, that we could another something that maybe some people would be interested in that don't know about it.
Yeah, I
because of the Peugeots, for example, they introduced orthodoxy, and now you've got all these people who are really into it because it really spoke to them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been a really good journey for me, and
Mhm.
it really has engaged the more masculine side of my faith,
Oh,
I would say.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I've seen men in my community
Mhm.
grow, being able to really take a more procedural and
Mhm.
more, yeah, I'd say procedural is good
Yeah.
approach to their expression of faith. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. And it's something that yeah, it's very common. I tell
Yeah.
people, try to give a shorthand of where I'm at, and people don't know where to put me. So
Well, it's a new one for me, so I'd be really interested in learning about it. So
yeah, yeah,
thank you so much for coming on, and really enjoyed this conversation.
yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.
And I'll reach out again for the next one, or you reach out to me.
Sure, sounds good.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.